This is not just the story of a girl from the 60s. It's a sweeping chronicle of loss, rebellion, love, and temptation, set against the backdrop of a cultural revolution. A time when music shattered borders and dreams were born from the ruins of the old world. Michelle Phillips seemed destined for movement from the start. Her childhood fractured when she was only 5 years old, after her mother died suddenly of a brain hemorrhage. Left in the care of her father, Gil, a free thinker with an untamed spirit, Michelle grew up in a house filled with books, bold conversations about life, and an ever-changing rotation of women. Gil made no secret of his passions, and young Michelle silently absorbed the chaos of an adult world where love and betrayal coexisted without apology. But the most surreal twist of her youth came through her connection to Tamar Hodel, a woman whose past could send chills down the spine. Tamar was the daughter of George Hodel, the man many suspect was behind one of America's most infamous unsolved crimes, the Black Dahlia murder. Tamar was older, worldly, and alluring. Michelle, meanwhile, was just an 8th grader with wide eyes and a soul aching for freedom. Tamar handed her a fake ID, a handful of pills, and a key to a new world. One of late-night Los Angeles, pulsing music, adrenaline, and something irresistibly dark. In 1961, still not yet 17, Michelle left everything behind and ran off with Tamar to San Francisco. That city would become her launching pad, the place where fame and heartbreak first collided. It was there she met John Phillips, the man who would forever alter her fate. John was the leader of the rising folk trio The Journeymen, 8 years her senior, married to a ballerina, and father to 2 children. None of that mattered to Michelle. In her world, desire outshone propriety. Like a character from a French film, she didn't enter his life quietly. She came like a storm. Thus began their saga, a story that became a symbol of the 60s, woven from devotion and betrayal, poetry and narcotics, music and ruin. Michelle would soon find herself at the heart of one of the most explosive dramas in music history, Inside the Mamas and the Papas, where angelic harmonies masked jealous rages and emotional collapse replaced musical unity. And the secrets? They never left her side. Even after the untimely death of Cass Elliot, her friend and fellow bandmate, one mystery remained. Who was the father of Cass's child? It was a secret Cass took to her grave. Many years later, Michelle finally solved the puzzle of her youth. The answer was staggering. Not a coincidence, but a revelation that made everything fall into place like a long-forgotten jigsaw. Michelle Phillips is not just a singer with a porcelain face. She is an emblem of a time when freedom was a road paved with thorns, when music demanded everything, and every chord carried the weight of a fractured soul. And yet, she endured. She emerged from the fire not scorched, but transformed. Sometimes, to understand a woman, you have to listen to the song her past sings. And in Michelle's case, it plays like an old tape, with scratches, with static, but with undeniable soul. One quiet afternoon, amid the ordinary rhythm of life, someone knocked on Susan's door. Standing there was a woman, clearly nervous, like someone stepping into a confessional. Her voice trembled as she finally managed to say the words, "I'm in love with your husband." Susan didn't flinch. Not a hint of shock in her voice, only the calm of someone who'd heard it all before. With a weary dignity, she let the woman in and said, "He has a woman in every city. You're just the next one, darling." The woman's name was Michelle. She wasn't the first, but she would be the one. The one John Phillips truly fell for. He would later say that she came into his life like a dream that suddenly stepped into the real world. By the early 1960s, their love had turned into a whirlwind. Not long after, John divorced Susan and moved with Michelle to New York, a city of music, a city of dreams. There, they got married, as if sealing what once seemed like just another fleeting affair. But John wasn't just a musician. He was an artist through and through, brilliant, intense, dangerously magnetic, like a potion seller from a forgotten fairy tale. He was always chasing what was fashionable, changing musical styles like stage costumes. Yet behind the scenes, his deepest craving was for control, especially over Michelle. She had the face of an angel, and the world saw a rising star in modeling. But John's jealousy dimmed her light. He didn't want her looking at the world without him in the frame. Modeling contracts were replaced by vocal lessons. Her personal path, overwritten by a place in his band. And so, their music was born, filled with passion, pain, and addiction. One cold night, high and alone, John wandered the empty streets of New York. The trees were bare, the air biting. He murmured to himself, "All the leaves are brown, and the sky is gray." He rushed home, shook Michelle awake, and excitedly blurted, "Help me. We have to finish this. Now." That night, California Dreamin' was born. An anthem for a generation desperate to escape reality and lose itself in the golden myth of California. Soon, they were joined by Denny Doherty, soft-voiced like a troubadour from another time, and the fierce, boundless Cass Elliot. Together they became the Mamas and the Papas, the voice of the 60s, a tidal wave of freedom, rebellion, and idealism. But while their music conquered the world, their personal lives fell apart. John's jealousy became suffocating, and Michelle, instead of surrendering, broke free. She was tired of being someone else's muse. That's when Ross Tottleman entered her life, the boyfriend of Michelle's sister. Sparks flew. The affair was a rebellion against fate and against John himself. Suddenly, she was the one being unfaithful, and John couldn't handle it. One night he called Ross. His voice was low, threatening. If someone else were in my place, they'd be holding a shotgun. The threat worked. Ross backed off. But Michelle didn't beg for forgiveness. She felt no guilt. She had grown up watching her father replace women like clothes, and learned one thing: sexuality isn't something to be ashamed of. In response, John wrote Go Where You Wanna Go, a song of betrayal, of letting go. But it wasn't just about them anymore. Their personal drama had become the band's crisis. And even as California Dreamin' soared up the charts in 1965, even as they appeared on The Ed Sullivan Show, the cracks behind the scenes grew deeper. This was a story of love, betrayal, and music. A story of a generation trying to live by its own rules, and of two people searching for each other in a world that kept pulling them apart. Beneath the sound of crashing waves and the strumming of guitars in the turbulent 60s, as youth screamed for freedom and music rewrote the world's rhythm, unfolded the story of a woman whose life swayed between a love ballad and the pounding beat of rock and roll. Michelle Phillips, with the face of a Madonna and the soul of a restless wanderer, walked the edge, trying to weave art, passion, and heartbreak into the breath of her time. Her love story with John Phillips, her first husband and creative partner, began to fray as their arguments grew sharper, cutting like a blade. Their marriage had already started to crumble after Michelle's affair, but the real fracture came when she fell for another member of their group, Denny Doherty. The pull between them was electric, almost fated, igniting amid rehearsals in a way that felt inevitable. John, a man who could turn heartbreak into harmony like an alchemist, didn't scream or storm out. Instead, he wrote a song. I Saw Her Again became the soundtrack of his shattered heart. But this time, not even melody could mend the wound. Michelle and John separated. He found solace in the arms of socialite and Marshall, while Michelle followed her own path, one that led to Gene Clark of the Byrds. It was meant to stay a secret, but love, especially for someone like Michelle, never played by the rules. Gene showed up at one of their concerts wearing a bold red shirt and sat right in the front row. He wasn't hiding. He was a statement. And Michelle, catching his fire, sang straight to him, with a rawness that made it feel like the entire stage belonged only to them. John sat nearby, watching, burning with anger, wounded and powerless. After the show, John snapped. He kicked Michelle out of the group, her creation. She turned to her fellow bandmates for support, but they stood by John. It all happened in a flash. One day she was on stage, the next she was outside, alone. Outwardly, Michelle remained the same, soft-eyed and radiant, but inside, a storm was raging. When she was replaced by Jill Gibson, the producer's girlfriend, the message was clear. She was out. Michelle spiraled. She stormed into the studio, shouting that she would bury them all. When Denny refused to defend her, she tried to hit him. Michelle was a woman who felt too deeply, lived too wildly, and loved with abandon. But the mamas and the papas were never just about harmony. They were about tension, too, the kind that sparks brilliance. And eventually, the storm calmed just long enough to bring her back. For a brief, fragile moment, the group was whole again. They continued shaping the sound of the decade, performing at the Monterey Pop Festival alongside future icons like Jimi Hendrix. Their song San Francisco became an anthem for a generation dreaming of love, freedom, and sun-soaked rebellion. Michelle and John bought a mansion in Bel Air. The halls echoed with guitars and laughter. The champagne flowed, and the guest list read like a who's who of rock stars, actors, and poets. It was during this whirlwind that Michelle discovered she was pregnant. They named their daughter China Phillips, their only child, and a symbol of the fragile peace they tried to build amid the chaos of their lives. But behind the grand facade and the promise of motherhood lingered a shadow. Domestic bliss was a delicate illusion. Even when their voices lit up the stage like strands of light through the fog of the era, something inside Michelle remained clenched. The ache of past wounds or a silent fear of what was still to come. And yet, she stayed true to herself. A woman who sang of love even when it left her weary, but who never stopped believing in its power. In the dazzling glow of the mamas and the papas, there was a silence, heavy, unsettling, almost imperceptible to the outside world. Within that silence lived Michelle Phillips, whose life offstage felt like a sealed room with no windows. The house she moved into with John Phillips was far from a warm family home. It was more like a gloomy labyrinth where light barely lingered. Tamar Hill, sister of Cass Elliot, once recalled visiting Michelle at their Bel Air mansion. That house was dark, she said, and not just because the lights were off. It had John's darkness, a darkness so suffocating that, on one occasion, John wouldn't even let Michelle come out to greet her guest. What happened behind those closed doors? Even now, Michelle rarely speaks of it, as if she's guarding not only her wounds but the memory of that time, something sacred in its pain. The few things she has shared echo like fragments of a nightmare. One incident of physical abuse ended with her in the hospital. Just one, but perhaps one was enough to shatter everything inside her. That same year, 1968, Michelle held a newborn in her arms. Little China had just been born, a fragile spark of hope. But in a home thick with fear and anxiety, hope had no room to grow. So Michelle made the painful but inevitable choice. She left John. And John. He was falling fast. Ensnared in addiction, he was no longer the brilliant composer once admired by his peers. He was becoming a broken shadow of himself. Even Keith Richards, the very emblem of rock and roll excess, once kicked him out of a party. That says something. Their divorce coincided with the unraveling of the band. Cass Elliot went her own way, public taste shifted, and the magic of the mamas and the papas slowly faded. By 1969, it was all over, the band, the marriage, and an entire era. But Michelle did not sink. Like a woman washed ashore after a storm, she emerged, battered, but alive. Soon, she found a new stage, the world of cinema. Among her early admirers was a bold young Jack Nicholson. Michelle auditioned for roles, and eventually, luck smiled. She landed the lead in The Last Movie, a project by Dennis Hopper, the legendary force behind Easy Rider, a man as obsessed with chaos as her former husband. Michelle knew exactly what she was stepping into. Hopper was a creative hurricane, a man who didn't believe in boundaries, and perhaps that's what drew her in. For a woman shaped by tempests, he was a new vortex. She fell deeply, desperately, like a nurse trying to save a soul sinking into madness. Filming in Peru turned into a wild descent where drugs, delirium, and artistic fervor fused into something uncontainable. Once again, Michelle found herself in the heart of a storm. But this time, it wasn't a story about a band or a marriage. It was her own story, one of pain, passion, heartbreak, and survival. And in that, she was fully herself. It all began with a love that seemed destined to bring a new life, and nearly brought the end of one instead. In the early 70s, as filming on her latest movie wrapped, Michelle Phillips, already no stranger to heartbreak, made a decision that would mark her forever. She married Dennis Hopper, a brilliant but volatile actor known for his rebellious spirit and self-destructive ways. It was the end of the year 1970, and with the final clapperboard snap, their bohemian wedding began. It was a ceremony right out of the counterculture era. Candles flickered from inside paper bags, and Hopper, in a move that baffled everyone, read from the Gospel of Thomas. Perhaps even then, something felt off. A strange fairy tale teetering on the edge of a storm. By the next morning, the illusion was shattered. Hopper, still recovering from the previous night's intoxication, opened his eyes and failed to recognize the woman he had just married. That was the first crack. What followed was a descent into chaos. He fired shots into the ceiling of the house where Michelle's young daughter was playing. On another occasion, friends later revealed, he tried to handcuff Michelle, claiming she was a witch. She knew then, if she didn't leave, something terrible could happen. But walking away wasn't something she could do alone. Her father stepped in. He physically brought her to his lawyer's office and said firmly, "Men like this don't change. File for divorce." And so she did. The marriage lasted only 8 days, but its scars would linger for a lifetime. After Hopper came another tempestuous relationship, this time with John Phillips. The damage ran deep. Michelle began to build a wall around her heart. She no longer fell for men who carried violence like a shadow. There was a brief spark with Jack Nicholson, and then a whirlwind with the charming but unreliable Warren Beatty. They were flares, moments of heat, but never the lasting fire. Yet through it all, there was always Cass Elliot. More than a friend, she was a sister, a partner on and off stage. Their children played together. They shared everything or almost everything. One secret Cass kept to herself was the identity of the father of her daughter, Owen. One summer afternoon in 1974, lounging by a pool, Michelle finally asked, "Who is he?" Cass just laughed and said, "I'll tell you when I get back from London." But she never came back. Cass had been feeling unwell before the trip, but still lit up the stage. She called Michelle afterward, overwhelmed with joy from the performance. The next evening, she was gone. She was only 32. Despite swirling rumors, it was not drugs, it was a heart attack. Just her heart giving out. The loss hit Michelle like a lightning strike. A hollow space opened, one that never fully closed. Time brought healing, and love returned in quieter, steadier forms. Michelle had another child and later adopted one more. But perhaps more significantly, she became a mother to many, to friends, to their children, to those who simply needed a place of warmth. Owen, Cass's daughter, would one day say, she became a mom to everyone. As Owen grew older, the mystery of her father's identity began to weigh on her. Michelle, now wise and grounded, took it upon herself to find the truth. She called every contact she had in the music world, and eventually, she found the answer. Owen's father was Chuck Day, a talented guitarist who played on the iconic California Dreamin'. It was never made public while he was alive, but after his death in 2008, the secret was no longer a secret. Michelle kept moving forward. She never lost her sense of self, not on stage, not on screen. In the late 80s, she became a fan favorite on the drama series Knots Landing, playing a cunning yet charming mother. She acted the way she lived, with fire in her eyes and steel in her soul. Today, at 80 years old, Michelle Phillips is still very much alive in every sense. The same woman who was nearly destroyed by love emerged stronger. Someone who found her own way and gave warmth to others in the process. Hers is the story of a woman who walked through fire and came out the other side as a home for others.